Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third drama webinar for British schools in the Middle East. My name is Sarah Kelly, and I'm the Director of Performing Arts at Dubai English Speaking College. Today's webinar is titled Bridging the Gap, with top tips for audition technique. And today I'm delighted to welcome our speakers, Paul Spicer and Jodie Quirk. Paul Spicer is the Creative Director of ArtsEd International. Paul trained at the ArtsEd International, the Arts Educational School, where he was the recipient of the Andrew Lloyd Webber Scholarship. On completion of his course, he immediately made his West End debut at the Prince of Wales Theatre in the juvenile lead role of Michael Spofford in Cameron Mackintosh's production of The Witches of Eastwick. He then played Nick Piazza in the national tour of Fame and subsequently joined the cast of Boy George musical Taboo, in which he played the role of Billy opposite Julian Clary and Boy George himself. Furthermore, Paul played the lead role of Princeton and Rod in Avenue Q, one of my personal favourites, at the Wyndham's Theatre, and made his Broadway debut in Lance Horne, First Things Last, of New York's prestigious Lincoln Center. Paul also co-founded and was Associate Director of the West End Notes from New York concert series, for which he headlined shows at the Donmar Warehouse, the Arts Theatre and the Trafalgar Studios, and its seasonal stand Christmas in New York at the Apollo, Lyric and Prince of Wales theatres respectively. As you can see, quite the CV and amazing talent and various opportunities that Paul's had. So a really fantastic person to be able to provide guidance and feedback for us regarding auditions and top tips on how to help our students. Now, unfortunately, Paul is a very busy man, as you can imagine. So due to prior teaching commitments, he's kindly recorded his webinar for us to be able to use today. Please, however, share any questions and comments you may have for Paul in the chat bar. I'll monitor these throughout the session and forward them on to Paul at the end. He's in close contact over here, and I'm sure he'll be happy to help with anything you might have sort of individual questions on. Just a reminder then that this webinar is recorded. It can be referred to at any point, and please do share it with your colleagues at school as well. So just bear with me one moment where I share my screen with you so that you can also enjoy Paul's wonderful tips.
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Paul Spicer and I'm the Creative Director of ArtsEd International in the UAE. And it is my great pleasure to be speaking with you this afternoon for this BSME Schools Network webinar, Bridging the Gap Audition Technique. ArtsEd is an 100-year-old theatre training institution in London, and at ArtsEd International, we bring the training and ethos of ArtsEd to our partner schools here in the UAE. Our president is Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, composer of iconic musicals like Cats, Starlight Express, Sunset Boulevard, School of Rock. Our ArtsEd alumni can be seen throughout the world of entertainment, on stage and on screen. From recent graduates like Lashana Lynch, who starred in the film Captain Marvel and soon to be seen in the latest James Bond installment and the new movie adaptation of the musical Matilda, and all the way back to Mary Poppins herself, the legendary Julie Andrews, and thousands of other artists leading in the West End and on Broadway. ArtsEd has been at the forefront of theatre training for 100 years, and it's with great pride and excitement that I'm here today with you, representing the establishment that gave me my very first opportunities in the professional theatre industry. When I was a kid looking through the programs of musicals that I'd seen, the actors that I connected with on stage had always trained at ArtsEd. But where I came from, you didn't do things like move to London and train at a drama school. It was unheard of, and I knew absolutely no one who had done that. When I told my careers advisor at the school that I wanted to be a West End star, he said he really couldn't help me, kind of laughed and showed me the door. Fortunately for me, I had wonderful, supportive parents who helped me achieve my dream to attend arts ed, and even though my parents couldn't afford the substantial tuition fees and the living costs of sending me to London, I wasn't going to let that stop me. I auditioned for arts ed purely for experience. I had never been through the process of auditioning for a conservatoire before. I honestly had no idea I would be offered a place, and happily I was. I auditioned successfully for a local grant scheme that would pay for my fees. A month before I was due to start, my funding fell through and I lost my chance to go, and my dream died just like that. Government cutbacks at the time, and I was devastated. But luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And as it happened, arts ed were also a bit sad that I couldn't attend. So luckily for me, Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber stepped in and paid for my school fees. So I really do owe it all to Andrew. 10 years later, I would become Arts Ed's youngest ever member of the trust. And 20 years later, here I am representing Arts Ed in Dubai, and I couldn't be more proud. I'm a creative director, an actor, a singer, a dancer, a director, a choreographer, a theatre producer, a record producer, a business owner, a husband, and a father to a cat named Peach. When I auditioned for Arts Ed, they quickly realised that I couldn't dance, and I knew that I had to become a successful performer. I had to be able to sing, dance, and act. So I set my sights on becoming a dancer, and I moved slowly from the bottom set all the way up to the top. And in my final year, Strictly Come Dancing fans take note, it was Craig Revel Horwood who offered me my first professional role dancing in the national tour of West Side Story. I didn't let my two left feet get in the way of what I wanted to achieve. And as a non-dancer, I didn't let my dance audition for Arts Ed deter me from chasing my dreams. Unfortunately for Craig Revel Horwood, or perhaps not, at exactly the same time, I was also offered my dream job. So I said farewell to West Side Story. The world's greatest musical theatre producer, Sir Cameron Mackintosh, offered me the young lead in his latest West End blockbuster musical, The Witches of Eastwick. Shortly after that, I began to produce theatre myself. And since then, I've sat through many hours of auditions on the other side of the table. My first production company produced numerous concerts, musicals, and plays in London. And we won a What's on Stage award, and we were nominated for an Olivier Award. We achieved much that I'm really, really proud of. One of my favourite productions was at the Royal Albert Hall, starring Idina Menzel, the voice of Elsa in Frozen, and I'm sure there's one or two parents here who are familiar with Frozen. And I had more dream jobs. I sang on Broadway, and I travelled the world in a musical that you may have heard of called Mamma Mia. And all of these experiences would not have been possible if it weren't for that fateful day in 1998 when I successfully auditioned for the 3-year musical theatre course at Arts Ed. Today, I will talk about the process of auditioning for a higher education conservatoire or university, and what I've learned from being the auditionee and the auditioner. The first point I would like to make, and I didn't realise this for years as a performer, it was only until I'd scheduled the 10th round of auditions for the 15th cast change of a production that I toured for 8 years straight around the UK, that it dawned on me. When you walk into an audition, the panel want you to be good. And they want you to be right for the role that they are casting, or for any role. Because auditions are relentless when you're on the panel. When you're producing the production and paying for the creative team's time and the London rehearsal studio you've hired, you really want the performers to be good so that you can offer them the job and stop spending money on auditioning people. And when it comes to auditioning for higher education courses, the same rule can be applied. The panel want you to be brilliant. So there's one positive you've gained before you've even walked into the room and opened your mouth. There's a plethora of higher education courses available and establishments that you can attend. Foundation courses are a great way to help you hone your skills if you don't feel ready to jump into a BA or a diploma full-time. There's also the added bonus that if you're making yourself known to a building like Arts Ed, if you enroll on the foundation course, you do a great year's work and it flags you up with the school, and that springboards you onto their full-time musical theatre course. Some buildings offer a diploma or a Bachelor of Arts. Others also offer postgraduate MA courses for older students, and there are many choices when it comes to the conservatoire or university you can attend. As a theatre producer, and as I said before, having sent out 1 million casting breakdowns and sifted through hundreds of CVs, I can tell you the following buildings have often provided me with performers of great quality, but it is not an exhaustive list by any means, and merely a guide for possible exploration. Arts Ed, Mount View, the Guildford School of Acting, Lane Theatre Arts, Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, Guildhall, LSMT, the London School of Musical Theatre, Rose Bruford, the Royal Academy of Music, led by the legendary Mary Hammond, and RADA. Having worked with many actors professionally from all walks of life and different training backgrounds, I always say it's not necessarily the course you undertake, but the effort that you put into that course that sets you apart from the rest. So what's the application process like? Well, slightly different in these strange times we find ourselves in now, and I'll use Arts Ed's BA and in MT and acting as my examples. Currently, all first round auditions are virtual. You will need to film your audition pieces and submit them as one video for assessment by the Arts Ed audition panel. Whichever course that you apply for, make sure you read the audition requirements carefully. Every building has its own preferences. The requirements for Arts Ed are thus: singing. You will need to perform and film 2 musical theatre songs. One should be a legit ballad written no later than 1965, and the other should provide a contrast and be something you enjoy singing. You should prepare and perform a section from each of the 2 songs, each lasting no longer than 1 minute. Try to avoid songs which demand an extreme character voice, such as Adelaide's Lament from Guys and Dolls or My Girlfriend Who Lives in Canada from Avenue Q. And if you don't know what they're getting at there, I can demonstrate, because I played the role of Rod in Avenue Q in the West End, and he sings the song My Girlfriend Who Lives in Canada, and it goes a little something like this. Oh, I wish you could meet my girlfriend who lives in Canada. So you can see that that would not be a great choice for your audition song. They need to hear your voice. It's really important. If you're invited to attend the second round, you may be asked to perform the same 2 songs in full that time. Here's a little more detail when it comes to your singing audition. What do they mean when they ask for a legit song? Well, legit or legitimate is influenced by a more traditional classical vocal training style. If the audition panel have asked you for a legit song, they mean a pre-1965 song, and will most likely be looking for something with a sustained legato line. Legato is a musical term, for those who don't know, which literally means a smooth and flowing manner without breaks or notes. And why do we ask for a legit song? Well, it shows your natural voice. Even if you have never sung in that style before, it really doesn't matter. All they're looking for is potential, and this natural sound is a key component in showing that potential. Avoid doing a copy of another song. They want to hear your version of the song, not Barbara Streisand's. So here are some composers to explore pre-1965. Well, Rodgers and Hammerstein, obviously. Lerner and Lowe, Leonard Bernstein, Cole Porter, Rodgers and Hart, George Gershwin, Adler and Ross. For my Arts Ed audition, I was quite daunted by this prospect because my thing at the time was the most popular musicals, as it is with most younger people. Pre-1965 was alien to me, but I did my research and I realised that I knew quite a few George Gershwin songs from the many different interpretations that you hear on the radio or on TV. And so I chose Nice Work If You Can Get It, and They Can't Take That Away From Me. And when they ask for a contemporary choice as well, or a contrasting choice, you might want to take a contemporary composer perhaps. And they mean after 1965. And do make sure that you also check out American contemporary musical theatre composers, such as Lin-Manuel Miranda, Andrew Lipper, Pasek and Paul, Jonathan Larson, Craig Carnelia, Robert Lopez, Georgia Stitt, and Lawrence O'Keefe. And perhaps try to avoid, as much as we love him, Jason Robert Brown, as he does tend to write for older characters, and also the music can be really super tricky for a pianist to sight read or play if they don't know the song. There are many British composers too: Grant Olding, Jake Bronger and Pippa Cleary, Howard Goodall, George Stiles and Anthony Drew, Elliot Davis, and of course Leslie Brickus. Pick material that highlights your strengths. As a rule, I never suggest you sing something brand new in an audition. If it's impossible not to, then make sure you know the bones of the song, back to front and inside out. I've had my most epic fails singing brand new songs in auditions. No matter what, the audition environment will affect you, and if those words aren't in your body, it's likely the outcome won't be the desired one. As a general rule of thumb, keep your song choices simple, and no pop songs unless requested. Composers to avoid because they can be tricky for audition pianists to play: Stephen Sondheim, Jason Robert Brown, as I mentioned before, Michael John Lattuza, Adam Gethel, and also universally popular musicals like Les Miserables, because the panel have heard those songs a trillion times. Some schools will list exactly what they don't want to hear, which is really helpful. The most important thing of all is that you tell the story. Whilst we're looking for a secure vocal delivery with a voice that has potential to be trained to a professional standard within 3 years, the most important element of your audition is whether you can make sense of the story and connect with the lyric and communicate that to an audience. Very often singers with fantastic instruments fall short because they're so focused on their sound that they're unable to tell the story. Potential students which move a panel but may have less advanced vocal skills often find more success with auditions. So keep the storytelling honest, truthful, and simple. Don't choreograph or overstage your pieces. So that's song. Let's move on to dance or movement auditions. So I often get asked the question, what do I wear in these auditions? Well, wear something that you feel confident and comfortable in, but nothing baggy and oversized. The panel need to see your body. It's really, really important. It doesn't mean that you wear something revealing, just something that shows the line of your body. They're looking for line and the shapes that your body makes. Shoes, don't wear normal outdoor trainers. Okay, if you don't dance, go and buy some simple split-sole jazz shoes or jazz trainers from retailers like Block in London, or Freed or Dancia, and all of these are based in London and they will ship. As I mentioned before, at the beginning of our chat, I'd never danced a step before I auditioned for Arts Ed. I just went for it in the room. Many times I've taken the candidates through the dance auditions for the MT course at Arts Ed. Most importantly, the panel are looking for potential. Core stability, strength, energy, stamina, how you pick up the steps, and your personal style. Rhythm and storytelling is key in this audition. You may get every step wrong, but if you are telling an interesting and compelling story, we'll be really interested in you. If you come from a sporty background, don't be afraid to show this off. Again, it's something that they are interested in, especially if you haven't really danced before. Monologues. Okay, so for the BA acting course, again, the first round is virtual at this point, and they ask you to prepare one classical speech, Shakespeare or his contemporaries. This should be no longer than 2 minutes. It can be free of gender. Present the speech in your own voice, the voice that you speak in every day. Keep the speech as age appropriate to you as possible. Use material that excites you and that you are passionate about. It's really, really important. Also, prepare a contemporary speech from a play published in the last 10 years. And the same rules apply as with the classical speech. And if comedy is your thing, make sure that you show that skill. It's advisable to choose 2 contrasting pieces. And a lot of great Shakespeare is comedic, maybe closer to your age, energy, and general gait. So maybe your contemporary choice could be your dramatic choice. Food for thought. It's super important that you warm up for your auditions physically and vocally, and have a few exercises up your sleeve that will keep you warm vocally throughout the day. Physically, I used to go to the gym before an audition, definitely do at least some cardiovascular exercise, but nothing too strenuous. Vocally, sirening or making a tiny baby puppy whine really helps, like this. Something like that, strange. I used to go on the tube to auditions in London, and I always got some funny looks doing this, but hey ho, that's life. Make sure that you stay hydrated and eat foods that will keep your energy levels up. It will take around 2 hours for the water you swallow to hydrate your larynx and vocal folds. Very interesting. Make sure you keep drinking throughout the day. Foods such as bananas, apples, brown rice, sweet potato will give you sustained energy throughout the day, and some like chocolate bars, white bread, energy drinks will make you crash. You don't want that. I had a horrible experience in an audition for a musical called Saturday Night Fever, which I'd always wanted to appear in, and this was my chance, and I finally got that chance to audition for the director and choreographer, Arlene Phillips. I got through a really grueling 3-hour dance audition, and then I came to sing, which I felt at the time was my strength, and I came to open my mouth and nothing came out because I was so dehydrated by that point. I couldn't sing. And I didn't bring enough water or food with me, and I completely blew it. And it's so important to keep yourselves hydrated and fueled. Don't make that same mistake. So whether it's an audition or an interview, here are some final thoughts. If you're lucky enough to be good at what you love, get really, really good at it. Become an expert, and then in your meeting, execute what you're really good at with a level of confidence. It took me a while to begin to enjoy auditioning. I remember at a time when I was doing a lot of singing on the corporate circuit, where quite often people don't even look at you or listen to you or notice you're there, but you have to pay the rent. And I was invited to audition for the role of Raoul in the West End production of Phantom of the Opera. And my first reaction was, hey, I'm not right for this. Sometimes that happens. I don't sound like Raoul necessarily. And Sir Cameron McIntosh just said, come in and try it out. So I did. And my audition was on stage at Her Majesty's Theatre, which is truly a stunning place if you've never been. I remember walking out onto that stage, all the lights blinding me, looking out into the pitch black auditorium, and it just took my breath away. I walked over to the pianist and I gave him my sheet music, and it was a gentleman who is one of our greatest musical directors playing for me. And I was just gobsmacked and also honoured that he was the pianist. And I relaxed because I knew he'd play it beautifully. And I sang my song and the panel actually listened to me. And you almost don't need a mic in those theatres because the acoustics are so great. And I finished my song and the panel said, "No, you're right, you're not Rao." But it was lovely to hear your voice again. And quite happily, I said my goodbyes. I said thank you to the pianist. And I thought it's actually a privilege to audition, for people to take the time out of their day to call you into the audition and then listen to you do the thing that you love the most in the world. Don't be afraid of auditions. Enjoy them. Bridge the gap between your passion and your fear. Thank you very much for having me. Have a great rest of afternoon.
Thank you very much. Hopefully some key information there, particularly if it's anything like me with your A-level students just getting ready to be able to take up those auditions. I know that ArtsEd within the UAE are auditioning internationally this year, so it's a very, very exciting time for our performing arts at the moment. So if you do have any questions in regards to Paul or what he does, or ArtsEd or auditions, any of that, please feel free to either send questions on the chat, or if not, feel free to put them on the BSME network. We will be able to pick them up from there as well. So my next speaker will be joining us in just a moment, and I'm very excited to introduce them. That is Jodie Quirk, who has also had experience of working with Paul as well. They are a dream team over here, so she's going to be able to talk to us a little bit about these principles put into practice. To give you a little bit of background, Jodie is the Acting and Production Arts Programme Manager at GEMS Wellington Academy in Silicon Oasis, Dubai. And as I just mentioned, she works closely with the partners ArtsEd International to ensure that the performing arts training and experiences offered at WSO are world class. Jodie herself trained at the London College of Music and received a BA Honours degree in musical theatre. She was then successful in gaining a place on the Musical Theatre Masters Programme at Mount View Academy of Theatre Arts, and also performed professionally in some fringe venues in London. After training as a teacher, Jodie wanted to ensure the arts was at the forefront of education. So she developed a cross-curricular musical theatre curriculum at a large multicultural school in London. Following her move to Dubai, though, Jodie now works at the Centre of Excellence in Performing Arts and Theatre Tech for the region, and is passionate about growing the department and their studies. So I'm just going to see if Jodie has been able to make it live on the call now, hopefully. Okay, if you just bear with me for a couple of moments. I believe Jodie has just joined into the meeting now, and she will be with us in just a couple of seconds, so just bear with us for a moment. There she is. I shall hand over to Jodie now. Thank you very much for joining us, Jodie. Over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay, Sarah?
I can hear you perfectly, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Sorry there was a slight delay there. There was issues with me getting onto the webinar, but welcome to you all. I hope you enjoyed Paul's speech. I've heard it before and I agree with everything that Paul has said, and he's got so much experience of the industry. I am now going to be adding on to that and giving you some tips and strategies that you can use with your students. So I'm going to be taking you through some practical tips that you can use in auditions for yourself and for your students. Sarah, everyone can see the screen okay, yes?
Yep, I can see it perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So everyone, I'm going to give you lots of information, but obviously at the end of the webinar, if you would like to ask any questions, that's absolutely fine. We can go through them for you. So as Sarah's just said, I trained at the London College of Music and Musical Theatre. My teaching began in London in a multicultural school, and then I've moved to Dubai. My role at the minute is the Acting and Production Arts Programme Manager at GEMS WSO, and I oversee our partnership with Arts Ed and some other partners that we have within Dubai. The school that I work in, GEMS Wellington Academy Silicon Oasis, is a centre of excellence in performance and theatre tech. So we really want to lead the way in the region. We like to offer our students industry experiences so that they're ready to go into the world of theatre. And as I said previously, we work with our industry partners. So we're linked with UDO, Arts Ed, ESMOD, and also New York Film Academy. And there is a link here to watch and see what our facilities are like. Obviously, there isn't time now, but if you did want to see what WSO is like, if your child or students are really into theatre, it's a great school for that. And this is our auditorium theatre that's 850-seater. So today, I'm going to be really honest with you, honest and open about my experiences of auditions. They have been extremely varied. I've had some really good positive auditions, but I've also had some terribly negative experiences, some that I've loved, some that I've never, ever wanted to do again, and just moments that will haunt me and were very embarrassing. So I don't want your students to go through that. I want them to all have the positive experiences. In terms of successful auditions for me, as you know, I trained at the London College of Music, so I was successful in gaining a place on the BA Hons musical theatre course. I was also successful in gaining a place at Mount View Theatre Academy of Theatre Arts in London, and that was for the Masters Musical Theatre programme. I actually didn't end up going, I ended up training for a teacher that year. I also had recalls at GSA and Central, and last year my school got to do a residency at Arts Ed in London, and I got to sit on the panel in the Arts Ed auditions. So I got to see firsthand exactly what they wanted. And I realised myself that auditions I'd done really well in depended on my mentality, the repertoire that I'd chosen, I'll come to that a little bit later, and also how much I had prepared for that audition and the event. So now I'm going to be taking you through an audition technique lesson that I would share with my students. I wanted to create a digital resource that you guys could have. So after the webinar, I'm sure Sarah will send this to you. It's a PowerPoint that you can go through with your students and that you can use in the future. I've created 10 simple but effective strategies that will help your students feel confident with their auditions and also tell them everything they need to know before stepping into the audition room. I have created this mainly, like Sarah said, for the post-16 level of auditions. So your students that are about to go off to drama conservatoires, universities, but these tips could be used down into lower years and transferable for all students really. So top tip number 1, students need to prepare pieces that really suit them. There are so many times when people will pick songs or pick monologues that they love because they really like the song, or they really like the musical, or they really like the play. That is not what they are looking for. In the professional conservatoire auditions, they are actually often casting for their 3rd year shows. So even though you're auditioning to be a 1st year, they often know that in 3 years' time what the 3rd year show is going to be, and they are often casting already for that show. So you need to pick pieces that are going to be castable for you. For example, when I went into my auditions, I was obviously a lot younger then. My 1st year of auditions, I didn't get in. I really wanted to be the big female lead who's always like the love interest, because they obviously get the best songs, the really romantic, lovely songs. It took me a while to realize, but that wasn't my casting. My casting was actually the comedic parts. It was the parts that were quite characterful. So I actually had to change my pieces completely. And the second year auditioning, I was much better prepared, and also ended up getting recalls and then getting in to a couple of places. So it's really important that you don't pick the pieces that you love the most, or tell your students to not pick the pieces they love the most. Pick the ones that actually suit you. You need to be employable and castable, because if you don't get an agent, if you don't get work after your time at the drama school, obviously the whole work and training can be pointless. And drama schools really value their members or students getting into shows, and agents will only hire you if you are castable and you are employable. So your choices are very important. Top tip number 2, please tell your students to not pick the obvious. I know that Paul has touched on this, but your song choices, your monologue choices, they are called your repertoire. So this is often shortened to your rep. So if they don't like your song choices, they may say, do you have anything else in your rep? The choices that you make about your songs and your monologues sell and promote your theatre knowledge. So if you pick something from Hamilton, or if you pick something from Wicked, you're not showing off that you have a deep theatre knowledge. You're showing that you know the mainstream Broadway shows or the mainstream London shows. That's not what they want to see. They want to see someone who's really done their research, who knows off West End shows, who knows shows from the Golden Age, shows from the 70s and 80s. They want you to have a broad range of musical theatre. If you pick the well-known ones, you're just showing that you don't have a great knowledge. And also, they are very bored of seeing these pieces. They see these pieces over and over and over. Again, when I sat on the panel at Arts Ed, someone came in with another Waitress song from the musical Waitress, and they were like, oh, I'm so over Waitress. So you want to pick the song or the monologue that no one else is going to sing. I always tell my students that, because then instead of being compared to 6 other people that had the same song as you, you are just standalone. You are the only person that said that monologue or sung that song. So it gives you a better chance of being remembered. Okay, top tip number 3. Some people are aware of this, but my students weren't when I was speaking to them about their auditions that they have coming up. They were going to take the songbooks and just hand the songbooks over with the sheet music in. The pianists do not like having the songbooks, because obviously when they open them and then put their hands to the piano, the book will start to close because the spine isn't strong enough to stay open. So they often want you to, well, they always want you to photocopy your sheet music and then fold it and sellotape it in a concertina fashion. So I would take the sheet music, I would hold it together, and I would sellotape it in the middle here, so that when the pianist wants to turn page, they can simply turn the page and move to the next part. If you have made any cuts in your song, it's really important that these are annotated and clear for the pianist. So please tell your students to not take the whole heavy songbook, to copy their songs, sheet music, and to sellotape it together carefully. Top tip number 4. I always tell my students that the warm welcome wins. It is so important how they greet the panel and say hello. So I would make sure that my students practice that first hello, that first line. It sets the precedence for the whole audition. If you start confidently, it often means that the whole thing goes better. And I always say, start as you mean to go on. If you start really confidently, if you start well, it means that you're going to end up being confident for the rest of the audition. Audition panels, the judges or members of the team in the theatre school want to get to know you as well. They want to see that you're a real human who's interesting. So it's always good to speak to them. I've seen many students walk into the room and they're like, hello, how are you? And the student might go, fine, thank you. They'd be polite, that's fine, but they didn't ask any question back. They didn't say, fine, how's your day? Just that level of communication, confidence is really key, because it's selling what you're like as a person. It's selling how you can network. And in the musical theatre, in the theatre industry, in the drama industry, networking is so important. Getting on with directors, keeping clients is all about how we mix with others, how we're confident, and how we communicate with others. So the panel are even looking for this from the moment you step up and say hello. Number 5, so halfway through the tips. This is similar to the previous point, but it's really important to address the panel and pianist to perfection. I've already mentioned about speaking to the panel well, but when you go over to speak to the pianist is often the musical director or the head of music or the head of singing within that theatre school or within that drama conservatoire. Sometimes there's someone who's been hired for the day, but mainly they are someone who works at the school all the time. So while I was sat on the Arts Ed auditions, they were going to be the musical director for the Arts Ed shows. When you go over to that pianist, it's important to speak to them like they are your best friend. Be kind to them, be calm to them, because they are the ones who are going to be playing your piece. They are also making a decision on whether you get in or not. So musical directors have told me that there's many auditionees that come over and are a little bit rude and dismissive to the pianist, kind of thinking they're not as important and maybe showing their nerves. And when they do a great performance and the panel speak at the end with the musical director, the panel may go, oh, I really liked him. And the musical director will go, oh, no, I didn't like him when he came over to me. He was totally panicked and a little rude. So that section is really, really important. You often have to explain the piece to the pianist and you have to set the tempo. My students also didn't know that. It's really important that the student doesn't get nervous and set the wrong tempo so the pianist plays the song really, really fast. Top tip number 6. I've put 3 stars next to this one because this was the moment when my auditions really started to click. This was the moment when I had my breakthrough, as it was, in my auditions. You need to be here and now in your auditions. You need to act. You need to be in the moment. In my first year of auditioning, I remember all of my auditions. I don't know whether you guys have auditioned too or you've seen students do this. I would audition, I would do my piece fairly well, but it would be like I was having an outer body experience. I was watching myself, and instead of actually thinking about the monologue or thinking about the song, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous. Oh my goodness, they're looking at me. Oh, what are they thinking? And I was thinking my own internal dramatic and worried and nervous thoughts. I was not thinking as the character. Now remember, they are auditioning you to be an actor. They don't want to see you being you. They want you to see that you can step up and become a character. If in that moment you begin your monologue, you begin your song, and you take a deep breath before you start, and you take a few seconds to center yourself and become your character rather than yourself, you start to think the thoughts of your character. Now, 2 things happen here. When you become your character, the whole performance will be better because you're having the thoughts of the character, because you're thinking about where that character's just been, because you're thinking of where that character, who that character is talking to. Your performance is much more meaningful and more truthful because you're imagining that you are the character. Also, it means that you're not having your own worried thoughts, you're having the character's thoughts. So as soon as I actually started to step into my character in those moments, it was like the minute audition would pass, I would stop and then I'd come back to Jodie and think, oh goodness, now I'm nervous. Oh my God, how did that go? Then I would reflect on what I did. But in that moment, I wasn't even myself anymore. I was truly being the character. So I was less nervous because I wasn't thinking my own thoughts. I wasn't in my own nervous state. I was thinking fully as the character. This is when I started to get recalls, and this is what they want to see. They want to see that you can fully act and fully become the character. So I think if your students are doing mock auditions for you, if you see them getting panicked, do some questions or kind of character development with them where you say, who are you? But get them to answer as the character. Where have you been? What are you thinking right now? What do you want? If you kind of do that hot seating interview technique before they start their piece, then ask them to start their piece, they should give a more thorough and meaningful performance. That should help them. So, top tip number 7. Know the pieces and the school that you're applying to like the back of your hand. If they like your students, if the auditionee does really well, they will most probably ask you to do more and sometimes redirect you. So I performed my monologue at Central School of Speech and Drama, and they then said to me, can you now do it as though you are the colour blue? Obviously, this was quite a strange thing to do. I wasn't really sure what they meant. I asked a few more questions. They were like, no, we don't want to discuss it. Just be the colour blue and perform your monologue. I didn't know the monologue probably well enough and got in a little bit of a muddle. The students need to know their pieces so well that whatever the panel throw at them, they should be able to then take that on board and try it in a different way. They should not just be used to running it in that certain manner, because they will switch it up. So it's really important that they know the 5 W's, which is, you know, who are you speaking to? Where have you just been? Where are you now? What time is it? And what do you want? You know, those general kind of character development questions. It's also an example of what you'll be like in the rehearsal room, so it shows how dedicated you are. So do your research about the character, do your research about the piece, and be aware that they may change the direction of it. I was also told to do my piece like I was in Desperate Housewives. I had never seen Desperate Housewives. Instead of asking for more direction, I just had to go and didn't do it well. So tell your students if they're unsure, they can ask. And when you're talking about the school that they're applying to, so if I was applying to Arts Ed, make sure they know the school inside out and reasons why they really like that school and really want to go to that school, because they're going to be seeing hundreds of children and they're going to be asking that question many times. Make sure they have a standout answer to the question, why do you want to come to this school specifically? Number 8, the quote I always say to my students, my performing arts students, hashtag say yes. I honestly cannot say it enough. Hashtag say yes. If the panel asks you to do something, if they ask you to be blue, if they ask you to be in Desperate Housewives, just have a go and go for it. Put your whole heart into it. They're only doing this because they want to see that the auditionee is versatile. They want to see that you can play many different characters, because if you can play many different characters, you will then get more jobs, you will then get more work, which then means more agents, more money, more work. Say yes to anything they suggest, be confident about it, be happy. Even if you're petrified inside, I always tell my students to be like, yes, absolutely, I'll definitely try that, okay? So try and give them that confidence, and when you practice with them, throw in some curveballs and see how they cope with it. Again, they want to see what you're like in the rehearsal room. They want to see that you're willing. They want to see that you're able to take direction. They want students that are willing to take criticism and try things another way, because you're not going to perform the same piece just one way. Different directors will like different things. Top tip number 9, I always tell my students to never make excuses. They really don't want to hear them. That's just the end of it, really. So many times I've seen students come out of singing and go, oh, I'm so sorry, I've got a sore throat, sorry. You've come out of character, first of all. So you've just shown that your performance wasn't truthful because you've just stepped away from it. But also they don't want to hear that you have excuses, because they want to think that you take responsibility of how you are in the rehearsal room and what's going on. They don't want to hear that you're sorry. And final top tip number 10, tell your students to please be interesting. If they get to the final stage, which is often an interview, tell your students to be ready to speak about something else. They don't want you to just be interested in theatre and drama and musical theatre. Of course, that's so important, but they like to know that maybe you might like traveling, or maybe you like going for walks with treks with your family, or you might like playing a certain sport, and that might be your outlet and your escapism. They want to know that you're an interesting person. They want to know that you have depth in your personality, and they want to know that you have something else that you can love that can be kind of your outlet and your escapism when the course gets too tough. And anything they do ask, please tell your students to answer with passion. They asked one of my students in an audition, how long have you been acting? And one of my students ended up kind of saying, oh, a few years, I've done some school shows and I quite liked it. So yeah, that's why I like acting. You know, it needs to be that 110% all the time. They need to show how passionate they are in those question answers. They're really, really important. So finally, just to finish off, again, I know Paul touched on this. What students wear in auditions is really important. They do have to be comfortable, but if you are performing in a dance audition, fitted attire is great, so like leotards and leggings. They don't really like big branded logos because this is very distracting. I'd say plain is quite good, but it's often nice to have a pop of colour, so something that makes you memorable. Remember, there's going to be loads of people in that audition. You've all got a number on stuck on you. They're not all going to know your names, but they might remember the girl with the red ribbon, or they might remember the boy with the blue sweatband. So it's always good to have that signature colour or band or t-shirt that makes you stand out from the rest, but not in a distracting way. Correct shoes are important. Jazz shoes are obviously great when dancing, and the shoes on the left are character shoes. They are great for girls because they give girls a little bit of height, which helps your posture. I went to the GSA summer school audition technique like week taster class, and in my final mock audition at the end of the week, I had really, really good comments. And then my final comment, massive capital letters, was, why is she wearing flip-flops? Which at the time I was like, oh, I was comfy in flip-flops. But they spoke to me and said it made me look really slouched. It made me look too relaxed. So footwear is very, very important. It's good to know as well that some drama schools actually opt for all black, plain black all the time. So when I auditioned, I wore a lot of black with, again, just that coloured hairband or that coloured ribbon around my neck just to give me something to remember, but so the rest of me looked like a blank canvas that could be directed. Okay, I've given you lots of information and bombarded you with so much. That's taken you to the end of my webinar and at the end of my top 10 tips. If you have any questions, please write them into the chat and we can try and answer them, and I'm sure Sarah will help me here. And as I said, I can send you this PowerPoint so you have it as a digital resource and you can share this with your students, especially if they are thinking about auditioning for professional conservatoires. So thank you so much for your time, and it's lovely to meet you all. Sarah, are you there?
I am there. Thank you so much, Jodie. Incredibly useful and insightful information. I'm sure it will support so many teachers, particularly we're at that time of year right now where students are getting nervous for those auditions, let alone the circumstances we're in, and they have to be filmed and videoed
on Zoom.
So helpful. Yes, it's absolute madness. So thank you. I don't have any specific questions come through the chat, but if I can just remind anybody that's here, or if you watch the video later on, please feel free to share those on the BSME network. I can get those to Jodie and or Paul, and I'm sure they'll be quick to give us a response if you've got anything, or individual students that might have some probing questions. So just to finish then, please remember to share the webinar with your colleagues at school. A recorded version will be available early next week on our Drama Network page. And remember, as BSME members, you are also eligible to watch the webinars in any of the networks. This includes teaching and learning, leadership matters, and safeguarding. So really crucial things that might just be able to help with some of your CPD whilst we are quite online at the moment. If you have any questions about the webinar later on, as we mentioned, please add them to the Q&A discussion little forum on the BSME network, and I will pick those up and pass them on. Feel free as well, all of the discussion forums are still on there if you want to add anything regarding exams or questions with what's currently happening, teacher grading, the IGCSE is still currently going, etc. It's a real chance for people to have these discussions and our tool to be able to support one another. And if you have any network specific resources you'd like to share, there's also the resources forum that you can add them onto. Other than that, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and thank you again to Jodie and Paul for all of their fantastic feedback and help with current auditions. Our next webinar is on Thursday, the 18th of March, where we will be discussing from drama to performing arts to create a blended curriculum. So please join us then. And in the meantime, we hope you have a good rest of your weekend when it arrives, and please take care wherever you are. Thank you again, Jodie. We look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you, bye.